If I had to use one word to describe Larry the Cable Guy, I might use authentic. While other comedians stand out for their energy, their edginess, or their weird faces, Larry stands out for a different reason. He describes a rural lifestyle that millions of Americans can relate to, and he's really darn funny along the way.
Like this, I walked out like this.
What if I told you that Larry the Cable Guy wasn't just an exaggeration, that everything about him, his voice, his past, his entire self, was completely made up? What if Larry was faking it the whole time? Today we're digging into the shocking true stories of celebrities who climbed their way to success and were exposed for their fraudulent pasts. Was Rachel Dolezal unfairly accused? What about Milli Vanilli? And what about the redneck king himself, Larry the Cable Guy? Today's story is about fraud, dark pasts, and how far you can make it in America on one single lie. Is Larry really Larry? There's only one way to find out. Before we dive in, make sure to give this video a thumbs up to help it circulate. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss any videos like this. Now you ready? Well, let's get her done and go find out.
What happened?
Rachel Dolezal. Rachel Dolezal is in many ways the poster child for people with fraudulent pasts. When the middle-aged activist was exposed for lying about her race, she was very widely mocked.
I'm not white. Whiteness doesn't represent my philosophy, my culture, anything about who I am.
Discredited and shamed, and in the process becoming the object of more jokes than airline food. But what's the real story behind Rachel's downfall? It's more complicated than you may think. It's not a question of whether Rachel lied, she did. But how exactly did her life collapse? Who exposed her, and what did they have to gain? Rachel had a very chaotic upbringing, to say the least. Her parents were incredibly religious and eventually became missionaries in Africa. They adopted many children, and Rachel was never very secure in her belonging. As she grew up, she became interested in Black culture, and eventually went down the rabbit hole to become the Rachel we know today. A different story. So how did Rachel get exposed? It turned out to be the last people you would imagine, her family. In fact, both her parents and her brother actively went out of their way to expose Rachel and make her a mockery. But why exactly would they be so proactive in destroying her life, even if her lies were a little wonky? Well, here's the thing. Rachel has claimed her parents were intensely abusive and brought her up in an almost cult-like household. Rachel claims that when she spoke out about her abusive childhood, her parents lashed out in the only way they could, by exposing her. Rachel's brother went so far as to hire an investigative journalist to discredit her and leak the news to the press. So what was his motive? Well, Rachel had also accused him of abuse too. Now, we can't take everything Rachel says at face value for obvious reasons, but there's good evidence that some of her claims were true. In 2010, Rachel was granted legal guardianship of her 16-year-old brother, when he claimed his parents too were physically abusive, and would threaten to send him and his siblings to group homes if they misbehaved. Now, none of this means anything to most people today. Rachel makes a living by doing hair and selling pictures of her feet online. But her story raises two very interesting questions. Who else has been lying about their background? And how much truth is in those lies? Milli Vanilli. When Milli Vanilli burst onto the scene in 1989, they seemed like just another silly pop group. Nobody could have predicted that they had lied about just about everything. But while you might have heard about their deceptions, do you know the true story behind their downfall? Are they really as guilty as they were made out to be? The first sign of trouble was when, during a live performance broadcasted on MTV, a technical error revealed that the two were just lip-syncing. The singers didn't do themselves any favors by panicking and running off the stage. Then the news broke. Newspapers reported that not only had the singers been lip-syncing, they hadn't even sung on their records. Instead, the vocals were done by no-name studio guys. Well, in today's day and age, this doesn't even seem to be that out of the ordinary. But then people were legitimately shocked. The pair had to do a press conference to prove they indeed had vocal cords. But nobody seemed to care. Their Grammy was revoked, and they were even successfully sued by people who had gone to their concerts. They were the laughingstock of America. But decades later, were they really the bumbling scammers that people said they were? Well, here's what Milli Vanilli said. They were two down-on-their-luck singers in Germany, living in poverty. They had wanted to sing, and after years of struggle, they had finally found a producer, Frank Farian, that was interested in them. Frank signed them to a contract and gave them their first check they had ever seen in their whole lives. But then he pulled the switch, essentially locking them out of their own career. The ink was dry and their hands were tied. And the story doesn't get much happier from there. The two singers scraped along, trying to get an inch of their former fame back, but without any luck. One member turned to a life of drugs and crime, and tragically was eventually found dead of an overdose. Larry the Cable Guy. This summer, Larry the Cable Guy is embarking upon a massive tour across the country. Blue-collar folks of all stripes and creeds will fill arenas to get to hear a guy who speaks to their redneck roots. But how many of his adoring fans truly know about his past? Is he, like Milli Vanilli and Rachel Dolezal, also lying about his background? Well, the Larry the Cable Guy mythos runs deep. Larry once claimed he was born in the back of an El Camino at a Fog Hat concert. But to tell the truth, it's widely known that entertainers, especially comedians, exaggerate certain aspects about themselves to make a more compelling show. But what if it wasn't just an exaggeration? What if Larry the Cable Guy never even existed at all? Well, I'm here to tell you that that's true. Larry's voice, story, and persona isn't just exaggerated. It's all completely made up. While Larry sounds like a genuine Georgia peach, he actually grew up in Nebraska and Florida. And he didn't exactly live a blue-collar life. In fact, Daniel Whitney was a drama kid, studying speech and theater in college. His own father had been a musician and entertainer, and Daniel was soon to follow in his footsteps. And it was at college where the story of Larry the Cable Guy begins. Daniel, aka Larry, went to school in Georgia, and his roommates hailed from Texas and Georgia. He found he got along pretty well with them. So well, in fact, that he could imitate their southern drawls to a T. But rather than getting mad, his roomies encouraged him. And when Daniel began to do comedy, he did so as Daniel. Here you can see him performing and notice how different he is. But here's the difference between Daniel and Milli Vanilli. Daniel does not go out of his way to hide the fact that his character is just a character. In interviews, he's remarkably open about the discrepancy between Daniel and Larry's voices. So from one perspective, Larry is making it all up. But from the other one, he is simply playing a character. America is known as a place where just one person with a dream can become a superstar. But what if that dream is based on a pile of lies? Only one thing is certain, and that's nothing is certain. And eventually your lies will come to the surface. What do you think? Do any of these people get a bad rap? Daniel, Larry, whatever you want to call them. Is it dishonest of him to build a persona based off a constructed character of some friends? Do you blame Rachel Dolezal? Do you blame Milli Vanilli? Get in the comments and tell us your thoughts. Before you head out of here, please click that thumbs up icon to show us some support. Subscribe to our channel and come back often so we can keep telling you what